Welcome to Stepping Up to Your Potential. I'm Sandra Robinson, inviting you to journey into the deeper currents of transformation and healing together. I'll explore insights which aim to connect the dots and reveal the bigger story of our collective growth and amazing potential. Join me by stepping into this journey of discovery and empowerment. There's a moment that comes after the healing, or most of the healing anyway, one that few people actually talk about. It's the quiet after the storm when the ego finally stops bracing and something else is allowed to unfold. I've talked before about the ego as the structure which holds up the framework of self. I used the analogy of the central ring in a yurt. When we stabilize that central ring structure, known as ego, when we heal the poles which hold up that structure, which are the poles of identity, belief, and story, that is when the ability to truly reach stillness can begin. Peace. That place where the ego doesn't need to defend itself because it knows exactly who it is and what it stands for. The state of mind where the ego doesn't need to tear down others in order to feel worthy, because it knows already just how worthy it is. This place has been mistakenly called the moment of ego death, but that, from my perspective, is absolutely wrong. The ego is more alive in this place of wholeness than ever, and it's quiet because it's balanced and it has the tools now to address any new imbalances which come up so that equilibrium can be restored. When I first started entering this place where the chaos was quiet, I began recognizing that I didn't know what was supposed to come next. So I sat with it and just let it unfold. What emerged was something I didn't expect, a kind of silent question that had been waiting beneath the noise all along. The moment after healing enough. You'd think that the question would obviously be, what do I do now? But no. Some parts are certainly asking that, but a louder question surfaced. What am I aligned to? Here's what I know. Once the ego distortions are largely cleared, you don't just gain access to truth. You gain responsibility. By this, I'm not referring to the heavy moralistic sense of the word, but rather in the truer sense, the ability to respond from your essence, to live from being instead of just from survival. Indeed, take a look at the word itself, responsibility. Response, ability. Look at it this way. It comes from empowered agency, about having the capacity, the discernment, the freedom to respond to life with clarity and alignment. In short, once the distortions began to clear and the ego becomes free to leave the incessant battle for stability behind, what I was left with was the sacred capacity to meet the moment on purpose. But I also realized something subtle yet powerful. A largely healed ego structure can still point to a distorted world if the framework of recognized reality itself is still bent and unbalanced. Enter the frame of language. When I first started brushing up against this new terrain, I didn't have a name for it. It felt like fog, like pressure, like something that wanted to be known, but I had no word for it. And without the words, without the concept being articulated, I had a very hard time orienting. Because words don't just describe the world, they structure our participation in it. In the episode on the paradigm shift, I described literally not being able to understand a concept that my teacher tried for months to get me to understand without success. When many years later it finally translated, I realized something major. I couldn't initially understand that concept because my framework of reality was within an entirely different paradigm of thinking than his was. So the word combinations he used literally did not fit into the structure of thought that I was participating in. Thus, I was unable to understand him, and neither of us could understand why. So, with that backdrop of experience, here I am entering into nebulous understanding of something emerging in my awareness and looking for the language for it to help anchor my participation in what is slowly being revealed to me. Learning the new words. It was during this time that a new word came into my awareness: ontology. Literally, it means the philosophical study of being, existence, or reality. Practically speaking, ontology is the invisible lens shaping how we see ourselves, life, and each other. Put another way, the ontology is the sense of I am, or the sense of self. This word really piqued my interest. The more I sat with the concept, the more I began to recognize that I'd been living inside other people's ontologies, belief systems, my whole life. By this, I'm referring to the systems that told me what was real, what mattered, and who I was allowed to be. Now, in this new place of stillness, of peace, I was finally able to recognize that changing the ontological framework, or changing how I see myself and the world around me, is more transformative by far than changing what I do. Then another word arrived: ontocracy. Rule by being. Not by dominance, not by money, not by dogma, but by being authentically grounded and whole. Now that term resonated me like I was standing inside of a ringing bell. Let me rephrase this term for practical use here. The idea of ontocracy points to a system or structure of leadership or governance that is based on the nature or quality of being rather than law, external authority, or force. Leadership through presence and alignment rather than titles or control. Ontocracy is based on a model of self governance which combines radical individualism with radical unity awareness. Think of it this way: it is the authentic expression of one's individual essence together with the understanding that others are sovereign too, while recognizing our interconnectedness. Indeed, self governance cannot exist meaningfully without a profound respect for the beingness of others, including respect for boundaries and impact of our actions on each other. Because of this expansive combo, an ontocracy would mean that a community or system where decisions are made by the clarity of each member's being rather than power dynamics now becomes available. I've described before how I see that we are moving from a power over into a power with paradigm. I've heard others start to pick up that exact phrasing, so now I'm hearing it from multiple quarters. Additionally, I can see the beginnings of an entirely new mode of governance on the horizon, something for which I had no name until now. Ontocracy isn't just an ideal, it's a structure that emerges when enough of us begin living from genuine coherence and integrity, where the ego is balanced. We have the tools to address any temporary imbalances and the grace to allow for compassionate understanding of those around us. Ontocracy is the architecture of power and economy after healing. Contrast with the isms: capitalism, socialism, communism. Different roots, same assumption. Value must be managed, controlled, or enforced. Despite their ideological differences, they each emerge from ontologies of fear, separation, and scarcity. Capitalism rewards accumulation, often at the expense of wholeness, exploiting both people and planet under the illusion that more is always better. Costs in terms of lives and environment are inconsequential. Socialism attempts to rebalance the excess through centralized top down control, often sacrificing the sovereignty or even life of the individual in favor of the collective. Communism seeks unity and enforced equality by flattening all differences, though in practice it installs a ruling class that dictates from above, replacing one hierarchy with another and creating essentially a slave state. We've seen each of these play out in the last 250 or so years, and all of them are showing their flaws. Thinking that they didn't do it right, we'll do it better without the massive amount of healing that needs to be done is a fool's game. None of these systems ask the most important question. What does it mean to live in right relationship with being? In a world where contribution is defined as production capacity, these three systems all measure what is amassed or stolen and redistributed, not what is embodied. Prize what is owned or sacrificed, not what is offered in living contribution. Reward extraction, not inspiration. But an ontological model built on the principles of self-governance and all that entails invites us to completely reimagine not just our economies or our politics, but the very architecture of value. Imagine a cultural space where attunement and presence are the currencies, not commodities. In this kind of ontological worldview, value is neither extracted nor enforced. It is revealed through the integrity, creativity, and presence of each being. Brush with the new using the old. I kept asking myself, what does an economy look like in an ontocracy like I'm seeing? I remembered something I once read about ancient Egypt, particularly during the Roman period. The Romans were appalled by Egyptian nobles who hosted lavish gatherings and gave away their wealth. To Roman eyes, it looked wasteful, even foolish. But to the Egyptians, abundance wasn't about possession. It was about divine favor. And keeping that favor meant circulating the results of that favor with others. To hoard was to fall out of alignment, out of divine favor. To give was to stay in resonance, to, quote, please the gods, end quote. That, I think, is much closer to what I feel rising now. Not the Roman grip we know so well, but something older, quieter, more radiant. A return to this idea of Egyptian resonance where favor flows not just because it is earned, but because it is recognized, honored, and shared. But it's a return with an expansion of everything that we have learned and grown through for the past 2,000 plus years. The question stops being how much have you produced or collected, and can instead be how many have lived more authentically because of your presence. It's a beautiful question, and like all meaningful shifts, it doesn't begin with policy or theory. It begins with you, with a quiet yes inside, individually, in the me, in the you, before it can take root in the collective. It's not going to magically appear overnight and we wake up to new earth. No. It begins with something subtle, like a deep rhythm pressing faint patterns into the fabric of awareness, there and yet not fully seen, shaping the world all the same. Not asking to be fully grasped just yet, only recognized as being present, allowed to surface. And it's those of us who can sense it who are the vanguard. It's every light worker who is trying to heal themselves and balance their ego so that this new system can be born through their newfound integrity and alignment. When that happens, the light worker becomes the lighthouse, sharing the way of being to all those who can see them. What it might look like. Other speakers talk about a perfect utopia on the horizon, and my thought is, how boring. No, I can see something much richer and deeper than a mythical perfection and a bland paste of neutrality. I do see a future where fear is not the ruling factor of the ego, and by extension, greed and control are minimized since both of those are based on fear. Duality will still teach because it's in the push-pull, the inhale, the exhale, that expansion happens, and this world, indeed this material universe, is built on the principles of expansion and change. As I see it, scarcity has been solved. In fact, my last post goes into detail on this. It was solved because we are stepping into our capacity as a creator being. What remains is the need to reorient, to prioritize lifting everyone out of survival mode. When food and safety are no longer daily negotiations, the focus turns naturally toward relationship, expression, and the art of becoming. In other words, self actualization, self realization. In the ontocratic world that I see, a farmer still rises early to tend the land because she loves the feel of the earth in her hands and honors the bond between soil and soul. A mason places each brick with quiet care, shaping shelter that reflects the dignity he inhabits. A scientist follows the thread of curiosity because wonder is how truth sings. A driver moves through the city with attention and grace, attuned to the rhythms that help others arrive whole. And a merchant, no longer driven by profit but by presence, becomes the steward of flow, ensuring that what's offered in love finds its way to where it's needed most and is met in return with trust and gratitude. These roles don't vanish, they deepen. Freed from survival concerns, they become what they were always meant to be, expressions of being, of love, not just doing. Purpose shifts from position to presence, from outcome to offering. In this way, labor becomes sacred again, shifting out of toil and work into coherent service in love. Indeed, women go through labor to bring a new life into the world. That is a sacred moment. It's not a coincidence that we labor at work, but from coherence, a different kind of world can begin to take form, one invited into being. Call to inner listening. You may not be ready to see the ontocracy I'm describing here. That's okay. And I feel that this will be a slow birth. I tend to agree with Lee Harris's timeline of a few hundred years, and as a student of history, I can tell you a lot can change in a short time, with the rest of the time being a refinement of that idea. Every person who decides to add their energy, their attention to this emerging idea will help that process even faster. Now, if the word or description here stirs something in you, even faintly, let it linger. Walk with it for a while. Let it shape questions you didn't know you were holding. Let it show you something, because this isn't about adopting a new theory or perfecting a new framework. It's about giving language, giving handles to something that's already stirring beneath the surface, releasing systems for fear-based control to allow structures that will rise naturally out of inner alignment, structures that don't demand obedience but invite resonance. The divine feminine is rising now because we are needing a new set of ideas to be born. And what I've described here is what I'm seeing on that rising horizon. Try, just for a time, replacing the question, what do I want, with what wants to emerge through me. Ask where you might still be measuring value by someone else's metrics, and notice what changes when you shift the emphasis from collection to contribution, from ownership to offering, from performance to simply being, from getting yours to making sure those you love have room to find their own alignment. This is a call to quiet readiness, to a listening that doesn't just hear, but heeds. It begins in presence, in the willingness to let what's true shape how you move, lead, and live. It's a step up toward alignment, toward becoming the kind of space through which something more whole can take form. TLDR, beyond fear and scarcity lies a different future, where wholeness replaces hierarchy, and what matters most is how we show up, not what we collect. I hope today's episode brought you some inspiration and maybe even a light bulb moment. If it did, you can do me a huge favor by hitting like and subscribe. Think of it as sprinkling a little magic dust to spread the healing and transformation. This podcast is on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and plenty of other platforms. You'll also find it on YouTube, with transcripts available at steppinguptoyourpotential.com. Until next time, keep stepping up. You got this.